Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel. I'm a psychological astrologer and an analytical hypnotherapist. And joining me today, I have Kel Ray. Hello, Kel.
Hi, how do you do?
Very well. And you are here because you gave a talk at the Astrological Lodge of London entitled The Zodiac Codex.
That's right.
And the title and the blurb that accompanied it intrigued me. So here you are, and I'm very grateful. And perhaps you can tell us, what is the Zodiac Codex?
Well, the Zodiac Codex, in a nutshell, is the blueprint of all of life. So it's kind of a big deal. And this blueprint is playing out in a variety of ways. It's flowing through Darwinism. It's flowing through our lives, which I talk about in the human body. But I'm not talking about personal charts. Personal charts are sort of the overlay. But the codex that I talk about that's in the body is what makes all of us on the planet, all us at the height of human, all the same. And it serves as sort of the psychological blueprint for our emotions. And understanding the codex can actually guide our emotions and bring ailments in our body into alignment. And this is where I'm focused. This is really the importance of the codex now.
So can you give us an example of how this works? Because in the blurb, that's what got me excited, is the idea of how it works in the body. It's wonderful to think of it as a blueprint for all life. And now we're getting to the nitty-gritty, which is the body itself. So let's hear then. How does it work?
Okay, well, you've got the sort of astro wheel, you've got the wheel of zodiacs, and I actually, just as a side note, I actually give a preamble on why we're using the meridian wheel. So because I want to use as much proven knowledge out there to show that we are completely connected to the zodiac. And the zodiac is what animates us, and it exists inside of us, whether we're into personal chart readings or anything. And I only talk about personal chart readings sort of at the end of the talk, which goes into medical astrology, but you don't need that when you begin with the code. Starting with the code, the meridian wheel from traditional Chinese medicine actually fits right into the astro wheel, the wheel of zodiacs. The zodiacs are archetypes from that I believe ancient medicine people understood the as above, so below, and how our bodies mirror the universal body. And I actually map this out logically in a video on my site on how we relate to all that is and why I'm using the meridian wheel. And so once we take the meridian wheel, we insert it into the astro wheel. You have to know where to insert it, though, and it was a heck of a lot of research, 14 years of research to really get it right, to know how to place this wheel into the astro wheel. And once you dial it in correctly, you have got the metaphoric language of the universe in front of you. And it's through understanding the metaphors of the body, the metaphors of the archetypes, that we can kind of intuitively feel around for where root cause is and how to address the root cause by using the archetype. And just to really put this in a sort of really light way, a quickie example would probably be, let's just say Aries with asthma. When the lungs aren't working well, it is usually because the force of Aries is associated with the lungs, and the force of Aries is not present in the individual. So that vibration needs to be amped up. We're vibrational beings. Everything around us is vibrational. And this zoo of archetypes has been created to show us the vibrations that the human body operates on. And we can know the high vibrations and the low vibrations, and understanding where your client's at, and then using the according vibration in unison with activities, words, and thoughts. So you work with your client mentally, can actually change the vibration in the human body. So when we're talking about the lungs and the Aries, when the lungs are low, we can offer new stories to the client, finding out where the client is at, and then offering new stories of identifying appealing goals and moving towards those goals, all where the client is at, though, but by using the archetypes of Aries. And some of the mantras we could be using, I mean, a real simple one would be, I can do it. I can reach my appealing goals. I can have appealing goals. I can get there, So, and I have tried this method. Actually, I've tried it on animals, empowering in different ways to take the fear out of the animal. And I have tried this on humans, of course. I don't have a lot of case studies right now. I'd like to get more case studies. That is really vital. But really how it works is by understanding the archetype that is associated with the organ, and using thoughts, words, and actions, deeds, activities to empower the individual, get that vibration that the individual needs in order for that vibration in the organ to right itself, to align itself.
Okay, so you were talking about the meridian wheel. So
Yes.
for viewers who are not clear on what that is, can you please explain that?
Yeah, so 5,000 years ago, ancient medicine people found that there were these points in the human body, and these points actually line up, and they form rivers in the body that man the organs. So they feed the organs with nutrients and they take the toxins out. And when a person is out of balance, you can work with the meridians as well. And that's what the glyphs of the zodiac are. They actually show the channels in the human body that go with each organ.
Okay, so this, I presume, also has links, because you talked about Chinese medicine. It has links with acupuncture.
Yes, it does. I don't go into that myself. I'm not a practitioner of Chinese medicine, but I wanted to use that to show the alignment to all that is, and then prove how it fits in with everything else. And you can get more knowledge about that on the website. There's a small video there. But really, I've written 1,000 pages on it. However, I think putting it into smaller forms for people who don't know all these things about nature and how they all fit together, they will be able to see it from a more sort of scientific perspective. And then we talk about how the universe works and how the human body works in the same way when it comes to thoughts, words, and deeds.
So there's a slight difference here, I think, between what traditionally has come down in terms of signs and their associations with the body, because Aries traditionally is seen as the head, and you're bringing it down to the lungs, which belongs to something else altogether. So how can you explain that discrepancy?
Yes, yes. Oh, no discrepancy. It actually starts before the lung. And what it is it's a spiral that connects outwards. And what has happened is medicine people have understood so easily the way the body worked with the zodiac, and they have mapped it metaphorically to the outer regions of the body. Those ones would be difficult to find. So yes, it does represent, Aries, for example, does represent the head, because the head is your identity, while the lungs represents the goals and the aspirations of the identity. They are both, they're hardwired together. And all the organs are like that, with their sort of external body part. There is a complete cohesiveness that joins them.
Okay. All right. So that's very interesting, because we're working with the concept as well, because of the energy channels that you're describing.
Yeah.
So the other thing, of course, that has got me very interested is the concept of vibration as healing. So because it sounds as though what you're doing is you are identifying specific vibrations as belonging to different signs. And
yes.
So tell us more about that, because I think that's another thing that really grabbed my attention.
Okay, so, well, if we're just going to stay with Aries, it's no mistake really that Aries would be associated with the lungs, and it's a cardinal sign, and it's ruled by Mars, because when you think about how you breathe, you just demand air every time you breathe. We don't even think we're not going to have it. This is sort of this would be associated with a Ram, Aries, because we just take it by expecting it. It's so hidden from us, but it's right in front of us. And even when we think about it being a cardinal sign, being first, when the baby is in the uterus, the lungs are actually filled with water, but a major transition happens as the being enters the world of light, which is the lungs just instantly drain the water and fill up with air. And this is an instant game changer. And this energy is cardinal. So, and even when we think about the element of fire, this sort of joining with everything, fast moving, coming forward, it's the lungs absolutely metaphorically display the element, the mode, the characteristics. And when it comes to vibration, using these energies, using these words, creating these thoughts with new stories that have these sort of Aries type element in them, can really give the individual that boost in their lungs to open up and to be more open to life, to let life in, to feel confident and walk in life, and really helping that person have, and I'm being really, really slim. I mean, it goes case by case, but the metaphors are there, and as you go case by case, you will see that there is the thread of Aries that runs through all of it. So it's kind of exciting. So creating the new story that has that vibration, and creating the words that go with it. And I say affirmations, could be mantras, could be really anything, a song, and having actions, deeds that go with it, make the human congruent. And it's congruency that we want. We want the thoughts, words, and deeds to be congruent, so that the body harmonizes and becomes whole. Because when it's not whole, it's fragmented in all these parts of us, because this is what the zodiac represents. It represents psychological parts of our being, right? And so when the mind is not aligned, the body will convey that. And we know this from Louise Hay's material, but it actually dates back not just to the 1900s with a whole plethora of publications there, but it dates back to early religions. This is the way the human body gets ill, but can also get well. So dealing with things on a vibrational level can really shift everything. And on that, it's a shame you couldn't make Monday night, but I have to tell you that the code is everywhere. It's in flower types, and I talk about this on the video, on the webinar. It's in flower types, it's in music, it's in the color wheel. It's all around us. We're just so used to it that we can't see it anymore. And if we can actually take this data, because that's what it is, the zodiac is the creative mind of God that created the system to bring us from lesser consciousness to greater consciousness. And so while we have sort of the female archetype as the backdrop, which is the darkness of our being, the darkness in the night sky, we also have the lightness in our being. The acupoints are our lights in our being. And the intuitive part of our nature is the darkness. And we can use the data along with the intuitive part of ourselves. These two need to be used together. And this is how it's all been created. It's not just the data, and it's not just into it. Together, it works fantastic. So shifting the vibration through using all sorts of different mediums that match the archetype of Aries, that kind of energy that it's conveying can really make a shift internally for the being to not just have more vibrancy, but more Aries energy in particular.
Okay.
Was I clear there? Did I answer your question?
Absolutely, you did, which brings
Okay.
up one.
Okay.
So that's great. We've got the idea about Aries. So
Yes.
let's Capricorn, square to Aries by sign.
Okay.
Let's look at Capricorn with lung issues. What are we saying there? Are we saying that by virtue of being a Capricorn, that vitality of Aries is missing, and that there's something here about will which needs to be strengthened?
Okay, so this is also what I talked about on the webinar. This is a little bit heady, how you're going about this here. The Zodiac Codex that I'm talking about is really fundamental. Like this is, you know, kind of almost not, I'm not going to say brain dead, but it's really fundamental. We don't get into air signs at all, but or zodiac signs at all. But when we do, when we really understand this wheel, we can take that wheel over to medical astrology. And this is where the magic that you're talking about right now begins. Now, this is not where I want to begin. I want to begin over here so that, you know, everybody in the globe can really have this little wheel and understand the fundamentals of their being. But if the illness doesn't go away using that, or it's something deeper, or who knows, generational, they can go over and talk to an astrologer who understands the wheel, and together they can understand where the discrepancy lies. So it's not, when we get into this over here, when we get into the medical astrology of the Zodiac Codex, that's more complicated. It's actually not super complicated, but it is more complicated. So And I do give an example of that in the webinar. You're coming at it really from sort of just the observer kind of psychological thing, but really, if it was something, just to say, if it was something to do with Aries, then we would probably be starting by looking at the first house. I'm not an astrologer, so this is, I am only a researcher who's fascinated, and I've been working on this for, like I said, 14 years. I'm fascinated by the congruency that I'm finding. So that's my work, and how it works with the personal charts. Yeah, you would look at the first house and you would see where they are focused, what their aspirations are, and you would probably talk to the client about, gee, what are your aspirations? Do you have aspirations? Are they appealing? Do you feel that they're blocked? This kind of thing. If they don't have a first house, then you would move to the ascendant. So, and you would go from there. You know, what are your aspirations? How do you see yourself in the future? How do you see yourself now? Do you feel, what do you feel have been your successes of the past? You know, so even looking at successes of the past could be, you know, if you're over here, you could look at successes of the past as an activity to really boost the lung energy, to get the individual feeling a bit more confident about going out, stepping out to be assertive about finding their heart's desires, you know, what their goals are, how they see themselves.
It's interesting because the reason I asked the question is because I had somebody in mind with a very severe lung defect from birth, who is a Capricorn. But interestingly, of course, that first house is very busy. And we did a lot of work around the issue of aspiration, etc., because it was very, what's the word I want, suppressed. And of course, you know, that fits very well because this is the nature of Capricorn, you know, that holding back, that, and what was missing was that will, which is why I phrased the question as I did, because it was an example of exactly what you were talking about from the point of view of that life force of Aries being suppressed, not in an Aries, but in a Capricorn.
Yeah, and for sure.
That's why I asked the question, and that makes wonderful sense. So I like the idea of changing stories because, of course, this is at the heart of my own work as a hypnotherapist. And in the very first talk, you'll smile, I think, that I ever gave for the Astrological Lodge of London was about the power of storytelling in healing. So this is completely something that I resonate with. And what I like
and are good at.
Thank you. It's you have to be. It's part of
life.
Of life. And of course, it is the very reason why I love astrology, is because it is all about story as well. It's
that's right.
The myths are the stories, the archetypes. And so I love the idea of matching the story to the sign as well, in order to give more energy to that sign, i.e.
and balance. Yeah.
And so it's making me think about ancient systems of medicine that seek to cure through sympathy. So it's the matching to get that harmony and vibration. And so we're back to medical astrology again. And also I guess to a certain extent the herbal side of medical astrology, of wanting to bring that healing in to harmonize with the sign.
Yeah, and with the rest of the body, so that it can come back into balance. Absolutely. And you mentioned something there that's really important, and I don't want it to get lost. is you said receptivity, that receptivity. Well, when you look at the night sky and you see the backdrop of darkness and the stars are against it, the receptivity is what's holding everything together. That's what is allowing the zodiac to be the zodiac. So it's really key, and that goes in a line with the intuition. It's really key to have an ear to the ground with that as you're working your way through the remedies, through the new stories. And yeah, I agree. The mythology behind these archetypes can be really helpful. I haven't used it. I'm really super pragmatic, like super pragmatic. But I do see the value in that. And I have actually had a couple situations where a client had talked about that, and it was very useful, very helpful, because these stories actually have the energy in them. And we can align to parts of these stories and begin to connect to that energy through the story, right? And so that could even be a good intro into doing the work, is to talk about a particular story and then get into the work of, oh, and how does this work with you? And what do you see for yourself? Did you see what Aries did here? And how does that mirror in your life? Or how would you like it to? You know, this kind of thing to create the new story. So I agree. I love that you're doing that.
It's vital, because the thing about story is that it's engaging the imagination. And that's the, you know, that part of the brain that links with the subconscious and emotion.
Yes.
And it's that emotional connection that we're looking for in order to bring in the new neural pathways, which
the power to believe. Yeah.
Yes. So speaking as a hypnotherapist, that is exactly what the point of hypnosis is to get everyone into that very relaxed state of mind where the mind is open, so that we can begin to change the story. And it's not just about me creating a new story for the individual. Actually, it really isn't. It's going back to the original story and helping them to rewrite that story in their own way, to bring in new information, to trigger the healing. Then we can work with more story to create a new story that is more metaphoric in its nature. So what you're talking about is extremely powerful.
Very much so. Yeah, and I really, yeah, I agree with you 100% about how you're going about it with the clients. You're acting just as a guide, and you're allowing them, empowering them to create their own story as you sort of just point and guide. And this is where the receptivity is absolutely crucial. I have a hypnotherapist as well. So super helpful, super amazing. And it would be, I think it's fantastic that you're putting the two together. I think that is a fantastic combination. Fantastic. Yeah.
There's two stories we can work with. There's the client's literal story and the reframing and the rewriting of that story. But there's also the story that I can bring in that's going to help them to stimulate their imagination. And so the two work very well together. So healing, really, to have a story is so important. It's because this is the way our brains work. And you were talking about the
through
codec.
comprehension. Yeah, through comprehension, for sure.
And also through emotional engagement. It's the reason
Yes.
why therapy works best, whether you're seeing whatever kind of therapy, whether you're seeing a medical doctor or whether you're seeing a talking therapist. It works best if you have an emotional connection.
Absolutely.
in that therapy. And
100%.
Study after study that shows that if you've got a connection with the person that you're having therapy with, the odds of you having a successful therapy are increased hugely. So all of this is wonderful. Now, I'm curious about your work with animals, because you're not telling stories to animals, are you? So how does that work?
Well, in a way, you kind of are. So you're using the metaphors, you're understanding the metaphors, and you're creating environments that are going to induce the vibrations of these metaphors, if I'm clear there. So when it comes to my cat, when I first got her, she was asthmatic to such a degree, they said she'd live 2 weeks. Well, I implemented the program by tweaking the environment so that she would get a little braver all the time and feel more confident about going outside, about interacting with other animals, about interacting with other humans. Because for the first 6 months, she was under the couch. She was supposed to be gone because of her condition within 2 weeks, but she's lived 14 years, so she's doing pretty well. But that is baby stepping. With children and animals, you can tweak the environment so that they have certain successes, depending on which organ you're focused on. You can tweak the environment to empower. In this case, it actually was to empower her lungs. So I tweaked the environment where there was a little bit more fiery stimulus that she would have to face every time, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And I recently took her to Italy for a year on a farm that was full of animals, other cats, dogs, everything. And she did famously well. Whoa, I really saw the work come alive there. So I was pretty happy about that. But yeah, so tweaking the environment to create stimulating situations that are going to stimulate the organ in a particular way can be done without any conversation whatsoever. And that can happen with children, and that can happen with animals. It's really fundamental because we're not going into any mental stuff. We're not going into personal charts. We're not going into the where have you been and what have you done or anything like this. We're really just dealing with the codex itself. And so that's sort of where I'm at right now, is just really the fundamentals of the codex, because really getting a strong hold on that, we can carry that into medical astrology, and it can be used in all these diverse ways that you're talking to me about. And it can really be like a useful tool to any kind of medicine, whether it's allopathic, whether it's natural. And they would even be able to use it in that new type of healing that they're doing now, which is called whole healing, where they deal with the parts of the self. And that's where I believe the codex will really shine, dealing with the parts of the self as well.
So let's clarify this. We begin with the dis-ease. So my dog has allergies. We know that that's linked with the immune system. So we think about the immune system, and then we think about the sign that's linked with the immune system. And we use that sign to help us create the environment in which his immune system will thrive.
Dead on.
Perfect. Okay. So out of curiosity, what is the sign that the codex assigns to the immune system?
Well, it would be Aries again. However, the whole body works as a collective unit. So really getting balance is kind of what you want, but you would start there. But really balancing all the organs. What happens when all the organs are balanced? And you use the code for this. And this is kind of where I started, because I was out in the Mexican desert doing deep meditation and Kundalini and all sorts of things. And that's how I stumbled upon the Codex. So really bringing the body into balance. When it's in balance, the meridians of the body pressurize. They pressurize energy to the center so that the energy goes upwards and downwards. So you're connecting to the father force and the mother force. And that's where we're all headed, regardless if we want to heal, if we don't want to heal, if we believe, if we don't believe, that's where we're headed. We are joining with our cosmic mother and father. We're working towards that. And it's the same for animals too.
I love that. Funnily enough, again, and you were talking about it being an Aries problem, because I've always felt that this is something to do with Mars, Aries, and he does have Mars right on the ascendant. I mean, it is right on the ascendant, and it is to a certain extent afflicted. It's, you know, it's coming in from the 12th, and there are things happening around it which put it under pressure. And I've always worked on it as a building of confidence.
Yeah, totally.
Different roots, but actually exactly the same thing. So what about plants then? So I've been busy sowing seeds since January. I've had them indoors, and you know, when you're sowing a tray, you have to prick them out, and it's always very disheartening that not all my seedlings make it through that transplant bit from one, you know, from their seed tray into the new pot. And there's always a loss that I feel. So what do you think is going on there, that some accept the change and some don't? And it doesn't seem it's all different types of plants.
Well, I think this is interesting, and I love your questions. They're fantastic. Okay, so what comes to mind initially is, you know, not all the sperms make it to the uterus, you know, so it's kind of the same kind of milk run, right? So some have the power, some they're born into the system, some have the power to go, and some just aren't ready yet, that kind of thing. What can you do? Well, I haven't really thought about this. I have, oh God, I'm just, you know, got so much work. But I would probably, I think that's more on the intuitive, setting the environment right, looking really at what the plant needs. And I think I can understand your question, because I'm a bit of a perfectionist too, and I want everything to grow and be flourish and be fabulous. I think this is more of an intuitive climate kind of down to the basics of the plants. But when you consider the nature of the plant, you know, you look at the leaves, you consider what it likes, you consider all the things that surround it, you could apply the code to it and let me know how it goes. So yeah, so you would think about, what do these characteristics of this plant, what is it metaphorically telling me? You know, what's going on with the leaves? What is it growing and wanting to do? What's the nature of the soil that it needs, thrives on? What is, and of course you would set up your house according to that, but it is something that you could apply the code to. You could, and then once you understand where it lies within the code, you can implement a little bit more of the element, a little bit more of the mode, a little bit more of the planet. You don't have to get into the psychological nature of the archetypes, really.
Oh, it's interesting though, because the reason I asked the question is because we've been talking about Aries. It seems that it's been very prevalent in our conversation today.
Well, it's good to stay with one, right? So that everyone else can follow it. Yeah.
So it's interesting, because I was actually thinking about, the reason I asked the question about plants in this context is because it seems to be an Aries thing again, because if you think about the amount of energy that is required. And I can tell you that you don't need time-lapse photography to observe this. You just need a propagator and to check in with your plants every few hours. And you can see that from the moment when the seed, they begin to germinate, most people think that the germination is the shoot coming up, but that's not where it begins. It begins with the root going down. And then you can see the plant begin to stand up. And when it begins to stand up, it still has the case of the seed attached to it. And you'll often see that when the leaves come through, it's still stuck to one of the leaves. So this, for me, is symbolic. It connects with Aries energy, that because of the energy that's required. And maybe, and you said not all the sperm makes it to the egg. And maybe what it is that not all seeds have that energy, the same amount of energy required. And so that when they're now changing their environment, it's an overwhelm and it's too much for them. So that's really an amazing thought now that you've given me.
Well, you can apply it.
Exactly, because now I'm thinking, what can I do to make sure that the weaker seeds have a better chance of making it? Well, that's a puzzle.
Yeah, because you can't separate them out, right? It's too difficult to know. But you can give them more Mars energy, right? You can give them more fuel, or you can give them more stimulus of some sort, right? Which it is.
Yes, and we know that plants respond very well to intention and energy. And so maybe a bit of a pep talk might be a good thing.
Actually, I actually agree with that, because I have done it with my plant. I have one plant, but the plant has grown to be a monster because I just go over every day and I just touch it a bit and say a few things to it and see how it's doing and check it out and talk to it. So I agree with you. Everything that's living needs love. It's just, what kind of love does it need? And the zodiac is really 12 ways to love. And it's learning these 12 kind of love languages, how we can apply them and how we can see when the love is out of balance, when there's too much or too little, in order to get that that state that we want, which is a state of balance, right?
Well, you know what? I can't think of a better way to end our conversation than to say that the zodiac is 12 ways to love. Beautiful. Perfect.
No doubt about it.
So I'm going to be putting a link to the talk that you gave at the lodge in the description box so that people can get a hold of it. And
for sure,
I guess the question is, if people want to learn more about your amazing work, where do they go? What's your website?
The website is thegreatmotherlodge.com.
Okay, the Great Mother Lodge.
Because everything stems from the creatrix, and it's the father principle, which is the zodiac, that enters the body of the mother to create this ladder of light that is bringing us all up to greater heights of consciousness to eventually resonate as gods.
Do you know what? I feel this has been a most uplifting conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today, Cal.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna. It was a pleasure.
And thank you all for watching. Do remember also to check out my own website. I have a great new course starting, 3 parts, Introduction to Astrology. So if you know somebody who's interested, do point them in my direction. I say, if you know somebody who's interested, because I know many of you already are well on the journey of astrology, and this is for beginners or for people who know a little bit but want to deepen their understanding. So if you know anyone who's interested, do send them my way. Until next time, I wish you all a great week and goodbye.